Hello and Assalamu alaikum everyone. This is Abdul Basit. I hope that you all are fine. You all are doing great. Today I'm here again with the summary and analysis of Gulliver's Travels, and in this video I'm going to discuss the first 4 chapters of the second voyage, the part 2 of Gulliver's Travels. Well, Gulliver's Travels consists of 4 parts, and in every part Gulliver goes on a voyage, and he meets some unexpected creatures, and in every part there are some references, there are some indications to the English society, and Jonathan Swift has tried to point out the follies and vices of all the people in the world through those various creatures that Gulliver meets on his 4 different voyages. So in this video I'm particularly going to discuss first 4 chapters of the part 2 of Gulliver's Travels, and part 2 is the voyage to Brobdingnag. Well, in this part Jonathan Swift introduces a new land, and the name of that land is Brobdingnag. The first land that was introduced to us by Jonathan Swift was Lilliput, but in this part, in the part 2 of Gulliver's Travels, Jonathan Swift introduces us to a new land with the name of Brobdingnag. So let's begin with the summary and analysis of part 2. But before that, please do not forget to subscribe to my channel for much more interesting and useful content for English language and literature. So let's begin the summary and analysis of part 2. So part 2 is a voyage to Brobdingnag. Chapter 1. Now the merchant ship called Adventure, with Captain John Nicholas as its commander, started its voyage on the 20th June 1702. Well, in this voyage the name of the ship is Adventure. In the comments you need to tell me what was the name of the ship that Gulliver boarded in the first voyage. And the second question is, when did Gulliver return to England? Okay? So answer these questions in the comments below. Well, now it was going towards Surat. The ship had a very prosperous voyage till it arrived at the Cape of Good Hope, where it stopped to obtain its supply of fresh water. The ship could not leave the Cape because the ship was found to have developed a leak, and because of captain's illness, till the end of March 1703. So they had to stay there because of some certain reasons, and the first reason was the lack of fresh water, and the second reason was that they found a leak in the ship, and the third reason was the captain's illness. So because of these reasons they had to stay there for some days. When the ship continued to sail, a furious storm began to blow on the sea on 19th April 1703, and the ship was driven to the east of the Molucca Islands. The storm lasted till 2nd May. Well, in this voyage this thing happens again. Initially, just like the previous voyage, just like the part 1, initially the voyage was smooth, the voyage was comfortable at the beginning, but afterwards storm occurred. Here again in the second voyage a storm occurs, and the ship is led to an island, an unknown island. On 16th June 1703, land was sighted and the captain sent a few members of the crew. Gulliver, because of his keenness, accompanied them to the island. Gulliver left the other sailors and ventured into the interior of the island. When he came back, he found the boat hurrying away, pursued by a man of a huge size and stature. While the boat was able to escape from this pursuing monster, Gulliver hid himself in the fields. After some time, he saw 7 other giants coming towards him. The one who tried to overtake the boat was the master of the fields, and others proved to be his servants. They came there to harvest the crops. After some time, the master giant detected Gulliver lying on the ground, trying to escape notice. By contrast with these huge-looking men, Gulliver thought himself to be as small as the Lilliputians were by contrast with him. So here everything has changed. In the previous voyage, in the voyage to Lilliput, Gulliver was a giant before those Lilliputians, before those 6 inches high human beings. But here things have turned completely opposite, because here Gulliver is just like Lilliputians. He is only a dwarf in front of those giants, in front of those gigantic human beings. They are having monstrous size and monstrous stature. They are giants, in fact. So everything has changed here. The master of the field picked Gulliver up and lifted him to the level of his eyes, just like this. Imagine that here is Gulliver and the giant is holding him to his eyes. Gulliver was trembling with fear that he would dash him against the ground, but he treated Gulliver kindly instead. Gulliver tried to show respect to the giants by using every gesture and every language that he knew, but they could not understand. He also offered some gold coins from his purse, but they didn't show any interest. After a while, all the giants got up, and the owner of the fields took Gulliver to his own house. When he exhibited his discovery to his wife, she screamed and ran away as a woman in England might do at the sight of a toad or a spider. So here it's a very comic scene when the giant presents Gulliver before his wife. What happens? The wife screams out of fear. So just like not only England but everywhere, women are afraid of spiders, they're afraid of toads, they're afraid of lizards and everything like that. So the giant's wife also screams out of fear when she sees Gulliver, who is just like Lilliputians, who is just like a dwarf, and who is quite a man of very short stature in front of them. A boy of 10 years of age lifted Gulliver by the legs and held him so high in the air that Gulliver began to tremble with fear. Okay, so you can just imagine a boy of 10 years lifted Gulliver from the leg and lifted him high in the air. Alright, however, the farmer rescued Gulliver. After some time, a cat that was 3 times larger than an ox leaped into the lap of the farmer's wife. Then an infant child, almost 1 year old, began screaming so loudly. The mother, in order to pacify the child, picked up Gulliver and offered him to the child, who seized him by the middle and tried to put his head into its mouth. So for a child of 1 year, Gulliver was just like a toy, and the child started sucking the head of Gulliver. Gulliver was also attacked by 2 rats that were of the size of a big dog, but very much more nimble and fierce. Gulliver killed one of them with his sword, and the other fled away. Gulliver now wanted to answer the call of nature. He tried to convey his problem to the lady with the help of gestures. At last she understood what Gulliver was trying to convey and took him to the garden outside, where Gulliver discharged the necessities of nature. Well, if we look at the chapter 1 closely, chapter 1 is filled with a lot of comic events. For example, Gulliver confronts giants. Gulliver is faced by a 10-year-old boy, and he is also a toy for a child of 1 year, and he is also attacked by 2 rats that are of the size of dogs. So these all are comic events, and most importantly, when the wife of the farmer giant sees Gulliver, she screams out of fear. So these all are comic events in the part in the first chapter of part 2. Chapter 2. The farmer's daughter, who was 9 years old, became fond of Gulliver and started looking after him. She taught him her language and sewed garments for him. She was about 40 feet high and was thought to be rather undersized for her age. So you can just imagine her stature. She was 40 feet high, and it was considered to be undersized. She gave Gulliver a name which in English meant mannequin, means pygmy, and he began to call her his Glumdallich, which in English meant little nurse. Gulliver, along with his nurse, was taken to the neighboring town, where the farmer hired the largest room in an inn. People were admitted into the room to see Gulliver, who answered to various questions asked by the nurse. During this, a schoolboy threw a hazelnut to Gulliver, but it narrowly missed him. Had the nut hit him, it would have knocked out his brains. So Gulliver has become the center of attraction. He is being presented before the people as something that is very interesting, something that is very attractive, and something that is very curious and new and novel. Alright, so he is being presented before the people as a plaything. Alright, the exhibition proved to be very profitable for the farmer. He decided to take Gulliver to the metropolis that was 3,000 miles away from the farmer's house. The nurse carried Gulliver in a box which she had tied round her waist. The journey took 10 weeks on horseback, and Gulliver was shown to the public in 18 large towns on the way. The party arrived in the metropolis on 26th October 1703. The farmer started exhibiting Gulliver to the public for a fee. Gulliver was shown 10 times a day, to the wonder and satisfaction of all the people. Due to the efforts of his nurse, Gulliver was able to speak the language of Brobdingnag and could understand every word that was spoken to him. Chapter 3. Because of the exhibitions being frequently arranged, Gulliver's health began to decline. Indeed, Gulliver was now almost reduced to a skeleton. The reports pertaining to these exhibitions reached the royal palace. When the queen saw Gulliver, she at once expressed a desire to buy him from his master. The queen paid the farmer 1,000 pieces of gold on the spot to obtain possession of Gulliver. He was also very happy to pass into the possession of the queen. When the queen showed Gulliver to her husband, the king, he was not much pleased to see him. He was a learned man who had been educated in the study of philosophy and mathematics. He could not understand how a human of Gulliver's small size could exist on this earth. So the king's feelings are genuine, just like we cannot understand that the human beings of 6 inches can exist in this world. The king of Brobdingnag cannot understand that a human being of Gulliver's size can exist. So for a giant, we as human beings are nothing. Okay, they think that we cannot exist, and if there are giants in this world, if we happen to see them, we will obviously think that how is it possible that the human beings of such a huge stature, such a huge size can exist. So it will be a idea that would amaze us, that would stun us. So definitely the king is not able to understand that a human being of such a small size can exist, because he has got a huge stature, because he is a giant. The king sent for 3 great scholars in order to consult with them about Gulliver. After much discussion, the 3 scholars came to the conclusion that Gulliver was a freak of nature. The queen became more fond of him, and she would not dine without his presence by her side. Gulliver's nurse, the farmer's daughter, was also allowed to stay with him in the palace to look after him. The king also became interested in Gulliver, and he inquired from him about the people, religion, laws, government, and learning of European countries. The queen kept a dwarf who was like a pet in her palace. The dwarf started playing tricks with Gulliver. Once he played a trick with him, due to which Gulliver fell into a large bowl of cream. On another occasion, the dwarf thrust Gulliver's whole body into a bone from which the marrow had been taken out. Gulliver was also annoyed because of the flies and wasps that were also of huge size. Well, here we have learnt that the queen had a dwarf, the queen had a pygmy, okay, and the queen used to treat him as a pet. But here things have changed. The queen has become fond of Gulliver. She admires Gulliver, and she cannot dine without Gulliver. It means that she loves Gulliver a lot, and the dwarf has become jealous. Dwarf plays tricks with Gulliver out of jealousy, out of envy, and out of hatred. So here Jonathan Swift refers to general human nature. Whenever someone loves the other one more than you, more than the person who was used to be loved, that person develops the feelings of jealousy, and out of jealousy the person commits crimes against the person who is loved now. So this is general human nature, and Jonathan Swift satirizes this wrong tendency of human beings that is found almost in every human being. Chapter 4. This is purely a descriptive chapter in which Gulliver gives us an account of the metropolis of Brobdingnag and the various sights that he witnessed on his visits to various places. The description of the crowd of beggars in this chapter has a disgusting effect on us because of the horrible diseases from which many of them are suffering. The lice crawling on the clothes of these beggars offer a nauseous sight to Gulliver, who thus describes it. I could see distinctly the limbs of these vermin with my naked eye, much better than those of European louse through a microscope, and their snouts with which they rooted like swine. Well, if they are giants, their lice would also be gigantic. Alright, they would also be of a huge size. Therefore, Gulliver says that he could see their limbs quite clearly with his naked eyes. At the same time, Jonathan Swift describes the condition of beggars. Well, this thing actually refers to the beggars that are wandering around in England and all around the world. We find beggars everywhere in our cities. We find beggars in every public place. Okay, and they have got miserable sight. They look miserable, and their clothes are, torn. So they are in a miserable condition, and we find them everywhere. We find them everywhere around us. Moreover, the mountains were 30 miles high. The country was well inhabited. It contained 51 cities, about 100 walled towns, and a large number of villages. So here the chapter 4 comes to an end. So this was all about today's video. In this video I discussed 4 chapters of part 2 of Gulliver's Travels. There were some comic events, and there were some allegorical things in this chapter, in these chapters as well. For example, the condition of beggars, the hatred of dwarf against Gulliver that can be found everywhere in the world. Every human being, almost every human being has got the feelings of jealousy for someone. Every human being has got the feelings of envy for someone, and out of that jealousy, out of that envy, we try to harm that person against whom we have jealousy, against whom we have envy. And the second allegorical event is the condition of beggars. Jonathan Swift describes the condition of beggars, and they look miserable. They are in a very bad state, and their miserable plight is symbolic of the miserable plight of the beggars that wander around us in our countries. All right, and there are a lot of comic events in these 4 chapters that we discussed today. I hope that you have got complete understanding of these 4 chapters. Thank you very much for watching the video. Please hit the like button if you like the video, and do not forget to subscribe to my channel if you have not already done yet. Thank you very much. Bye bye. Take care.